Okay, for round 2 of Comeback Kings, who better than the ultimate comeback king of them all, Mr. Stallone? Let's get into this hyper yo-yo of a career, shall we? Sly found his footing with Rocky. He'd spent a few years doing smaller work to get there, but after this launch pad, the sky was the limit for Sly. Fist was a reasonable hit after, but Paradise Alley not so much. He then turned to Rocky 2 to secure his place, and it hit big. Now, Rocky took $225 million on a budget of under 1. Rocky 2 by comparison cost 7 and took $200 million. That is a very acceptable drop. Worth noting that Sly also took over directing duties for the Rocky series from the second film. He wrote all of them. In fact, it was just the first and the fifth movies that he did not direct. Nighthawks was a small win, as was Escape to Victory, both of which doing well with the critics, so Sly was well on his way, but in 1981 he had the double hit of Rocky 3 and First Blood. Rocky 3 took $230 million on a budget of 17, First Blood $125 on a budget of about 18, so this was a mammoth year for him. After this, he had the critical failure of Staying Alive, a sequel to Saturday Night Fever that he directed starring John Travolta, but the film still made $127 million at the box office. Rhinestone was the only proper flop on display, but it was surrounded by so many hits, this could hardly be described as Sly falling out of his audience on a permanent basis. The year after that loss, he came back with his biggest year ever with First Blood Part 2 with $300.4 million and Rocky 4 with $300.5, a staggering feat. He had done it again with the same franchises. In 1986, he had another hit with Cobra with over $160 million, only here did we see things start to falter slightly. In 1987 he had the flop with Over the Top, but in 1988 he had the sizable hit with Rambo 3 with over $189 million. But even here you could see that was a giant step down from Part 2's over $300 million haul. The following year his prison drama Lock Up barely broke even, but also in the same year he had the massive hit with Kurt Russell in Tango and Cash, which took over $120 million. 1990 he had a hit with Rocky 5, but only to the tune of $120 million. The critics and fans also savaged that film, and this was where Sly decided to turn to comedy. First up was The Miss with Oscar, and then he was lambasted with Stop or My Mom Will Shoot. But few people recognise that even Stop took at least $70 million at the box office. But he was considered down and out for having so much savaging by the critics for over so many years. But in reality, Sly never went anywhere, and this could be argued over all of his comebacks, is that he never actually went anywhere. He kept pushing forward and found new ways to reinvent. The comedy reinvention didn't work, so he came back in 1993 with a double hit again, both in the action field. First off was the stunt-heavy Cliffhanger with a $255 million haul, and then there was the comically wise sci-fi satire in Demolition Man with $159. For the next 4 years, he was back in the game, but immediately was serving up disposable thrillers in the guise of The Specialist, $170 million, Judge Dredd, $113 million, Assassins, $83, and Daylight, $159 million. Half of these only broke even. Copland was the next reinvention for him, and whilst it didn't take huge numbers with $63 million, it did give Sly back his acting credibility, and to this day is arguably one of his finest performances. He then went all animated with Ants, which took $170 million, but then foolishly went back to the substandard action thrillers with the likes of massive flop Get Carter, which was a remake, another flop in Driven, and then another massive flop in Detox, and then yet again with Avenging Angelo, which also went straight to video. Sly needed to get control, and he did this by returning to writing and directing, and once again bringing back his two most famous characters that never failed him at the box office. First up was Rocky Balboa in 2006, a $156 million hit on a small budget, also a critical hit. 2 years later, he returned with Rambo, with the confusingly titled fourth film, Rambo, but it took $113 million and was also praised critically. He then continued with the direction and decided to go big by uniting as many of the action stars of his day together in the franchise starter The Expendables in 2010, a $274 million hit on an $80 million budget. This set off a sequel 2 years later, which took $315 million on a $100 million budget, but also in this period, Sly set to work on some other acting projects, including the Walter Hill directed flop Bullet to the Head, and then the $137 million hit with Arnold Schwarzenegger, Escape Plan, which would later itself spawn two very inferior direct-to-video releases with Sly and Dave Bautista. And then there was the break-even comedy boxing movie Grudge Match, which set him against Robert De Niro. Expendables 3 came round and took $214 million, a drop in the franchise franchise, no thanks to the dropping rating making the film more kid-friendly, a massive mistake. The franchise wouldn't return again for another decade, and even then in the guise of a flop. From here on, it gets patchier. Sly dabbles with direct-to-video releases, all of which are not well received, but also with supporting turns in the likes of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 and The Suicide Squad, both of which were well received. But his biggest move was returning to the character of Rocky Balboa once again, this time as a supporting player in Creed and Creed 2. The first one being the more important, as it garnered Sly an Oscar nomination for his performance. He tried one last crack at Rambo with Last Blood, but the film just about broke even and did poorly with fans and critics. In more recent times, Sly created a director's cut of Rocky IV, as well as a documentary about the re-edit of the film which he did during the COVID pandemic. And post this, he has pushed out a few forgettable films, but he has hit bigger on the small screen with the multiple season and ongoing TV show called Tulsa King. Sly has been nominated for a total of 3 Academy Awards. He was nominated for Best Actor and Original Screenplay for the original Rocky, and then later in his career nominated for the same character again in Creed as a supporting actor. He's had way more luck, however, with the Golden Raspberry Awards. In fact, he reigns as the champ of the Raspberries. Make of them what you will. I think when you look at what he's been nominated for, sometimes it's accurate, but most of the time it's more commentary or just trying to level out the ego of a very popular actor at the time, especially during the 80s when he was pretty much one of the highest grossing actors of all time. Sly seemed unstoppable from Rocky right up into the early 80s, hit after hit after hit, and usually the films were of good quality too, but once he got rolling with the continuing Rocky sequels and then Rambo started to take off, the Golden Raspberries were hot on his tail, and first up it seemed legitimate as he was nominated for Worst Actor for Rhinestone, and won. From here, 1983 right through to 1997, he was nominated, if not winning, one of these awards every year. That's a long time to hound an A-list actor. Even after leaving him alone in 1998, they were back again for the better part of the next half decade, but then they seemed to give him a break for about 7 years, probably because in that time he was making Rocky Balboa and Rambo. But the 2010s onwards, he's back in the green light intermittently up to present day. He did get the Redeemer Award though for his performance for Creed, so the Razzies aren't wholly without heart, but then again they've also nominated him for Worst Actor of the Decade for the 80s and Worst Actor of the Century for overall. To date, Sylvester Stallone has won 12 Razzie Awards, and also to date he has been nominated for 39. See, not even Madonna or Adam Sandler have reached those heights, although I am curious as to what their problem with Kevin Costner is. Oh yeah, of course. Anyway, if it's a big film, then the Razzies will likely put a spotlight on it, especially if it seems like a weaker effort regardless of money. Stallone has vacillated from annoyance of the awards to seeing the humour in it all, as he's continually berated by them. He prefers constructive criticism, of course, and does welcome feedback, but prefers, well, constructive criticism. But as he has softened over the years, it's clear that it's only the talent that gets picked on for these award bodies. So if anything, he's an artist that always pushes forward and barely rests up in between projects, always going forward with mixed results, but when the gold comes, it's well worth the wait. Like I did with Travolta, I have worked on a ranking for Stallone for all of his action and thriller material, and that will come in the following days. Until then, thank you very much for watching. Do follow me on Instagram and Letterboxd, and I'll see you in a few days.